Well, you can just start anytime you doggone well care to start. I am ready to start anytime you give the signal, Dad. All right. All right, come on, bring it up there. Swamp them with incandescent sounds. Gee, I'm singing like a fiend. There, that's enough of that. This is old Hunky Dory here, and we'll be here for 55 minutes more or less, give or take a few thousand commercials. And but speaking of Hunky Dory, before we get any further, did they ever use that expression around here? Did they use that expression Hunky Dory? Everything's going to be hunky dory. I can remember that was a great expression of my old man. Constantly, whenever he would get the newspaper and it would announce that the Chicago White Sox have signed another inept shortstop, he would look up with that, that big happy grin, his glasses shining where the thumbprints, had been wiped off, and he would say, well, it's going to be hunky-dory next season. Yes, sir. Well, the old man lived and died his entire life without seeing the White Sox get any higher than third place. And I'm sure that wherever he is now, sitting up in some cloud somewhere, he's saying, well, looks like a good season coming up next year. Gonna be hunky-dory. Down the chute he goes with a shovel in the cold of the hot, fiery furnace of hell. Speaking of the hot, fiery furnace of hell, let's take a brief moment here for a word from the inner recess. Every program has to have a distinct and definite theme. There's no question about it. You do that when you start dealing with life, you're going to confuse people because life itself has no theme. So, has it ever occurred to you that that's the great plot fallacy? Really, the great fallacy of all novels is they got a plot. And how's the plot of your life working out, friends? Is it a pretty interesting plot? Is it a dull, banal plot? Is it a plot that might be barely discernible to you? Your plot is not quite as sharply and closely delineated as, say, a character out of a Henry James novel. You ever read Oh, sure, I read the Forsyte Saga when I was too young. And I must have been about 10 or 11 years old, something like that. And I'm going to raise my hand right here and tell you I was not a child genius, not at all. We inherited a bookcase full of old, rotten books. And it was all nobody read them in our house, but we had this bookcase full of books. And I was an omnivorous reader. I read everything. I read cigar bands. I just read everything omnivorously. I would lie on my stomach at home on the daybed, looking down, reading. And one of the most concurrent, constantly repeated cries in my ear was, "If you don't stop reading lying down, you'll ruin your eyes." I'm going to ask you a question. Does lying down reading ruin your eyes? You know that thing they used to say, if you lie down, your eyes will be ruined, your eyes will bug out or something, the blood will rush to your head or something. So I'd lie there reading this stuff, and way over at the end, next to the Canary murder case, right after my father's complete bound set of Sax Rohmer, Fu Manchu, he was a fantastic Fu Manchu reader. I came across this thing called the Forsyte Saga. It had never been read in my family. And so I am lying down there reading the Forsyte Saga. Well, now this was about this family. And they had a saga going. It's hard for me to explain to you what a saga is. I'm not so sure that maybe your house has a saga going too. If you don't know really what saga means, look it up. That's spelled S-A-G-A. And so I am reading the Forsyte Saga at about 13, 14 years old. And I read, I don't know how many volumes. I think it's 3 volumes, isn't it, in the Forsyte Saga? And I read all the way through. The old man Forsyte, I remember he'd ride down the street with a buggy, and he'd whipping these horses. We didn't have buggies in our neighborhood, anything like that. We did not have Brahmins. I remember they kept referring to Brahmin families. I couldn't figure out who the Brahmin family was in our neighborhood. The Bruners next door? Who was it? The Andersons? I don't know. We didn't have any of these things. But I do recall that as a child, I was distinctly disappointed in my family after once having read the Forsyte Saga, because they had a theme running through their family. They were always talking about old Grandpa Forsythe's bad blood, or you know the old curse of the Forsythes. And we had nothing like that. There was no curse of the shepherds. I could tell, going all the way back to the Middle Ages. In fact, our family does not go back past, I would say roughly, the time of the first year of the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. That's the earliest recognized shepherd showed over the horizon at that time, and he didn't know he was. So there was no question about sagas in my family. However, the saga theme runs all the way through life. There's no question about it. We've got to look for a theme. We've got to look for a plot, a meaning, and even music. If music does not follow one note after the other in a completely logical sequence, logic being the sequence we've all agreed on. That's what is called logic. If it doesn't do that, it's called noise. It's called ridiculous stuff. It's called whatever it might be called, but it certainly is not called music by many people. Electronic music, for example, today, that the guys are working with, experimenting with all over the world, this is called noise to most people because it does not follow the recognized theme that they have been brought up on, the plot, and so on. Well, I'm a kid, I've got to tell you how I got first imbued in this kind of thing, this business of beauty. If I were to say to you, right now, if I caught you at 2 in the morning, if you wake you up, grab you by the elbow or something, wake you, you wake up, well, what do you want? What do you want? Say, sing a song, Charlie. What would you do? What would be the first song you'd sing? Everybody has about 5 songs that he sings automatically when somebody says, sing a song. What are they? Which one is yours? If you grab say you grab a kazoo and you want to blow the kazoo, what is the song you blow? Automatically without thinking. When you are in an elevator or something and you start to hum, what do you hum? Do you hum that humless hum that all of mankind hums? This That, I think, is the humless hum. Do you know that I was in an elevator in Nigeria? In Lagos. And a guy is taking me up to the 5th floor, and he's there operating this thing. He came from the Yoruba tribe. He had the tribal markings. And he's wearing a gray flannel suit, but he had the tribal markings. It didn't make any difference. And we were going up to the 6th floor, and he's going, 6th floor, sir. That was it. Well, now, I thought, gee, that's a familiar song. Well, not more than 3 or 4 weeks later, I have come back to the United States. I'm in an elevator going up to the 23rd floor of a big building in Manhattan. There's a guy going, same hum. That is the nameless hum of all mankind. It doesn't make any difference where you are. I'm sure that a guy scrunched down by the shores of an antediluvian lake there looking out over the ancient fastnesses of a primal sea, scrunched down it with his knees popping, with a pile of clamshells next to him, with the steam rising and the earth being born. From that Neanderthal or that Paleolithic throat. And you'd have recognized it. He's humming. He's humming the hum. Whatever the hum is, the mankind hum. The hum, the hum. And we all do it. Now, once in a while, somebody will put those notes in an orderly sequence. And it will go, then you've got something. Got something going. See, and everyone recognizes that this hum is an official hum. And since this is an official hum, it gives us some kind of a security, We all have recognized a certain kind of hum, and we'll sing, what is a song, when you think about it? It's a recognizable hum. Well, I'm a kid, and I'm about 9 or 10 or 11 years old, and music is all around. Music is always all around all kids. And when I was a kid, though, music wasn't a cult. There was no music in my neighborhood per se, just music. People, you'd hear music coming out, and most of the music that came out of the neighborhood radios, as you'd walk up and down the street, were guys singing through their nose. Thousands of hillbillies were singing in my neighborhood, which was northern Indiana, and all you would ever hear would be the sound, I'll be coming round a mountain when she comes, rick-a-tick-a-thing. She'll be coming round a mountain when she comes, rick-a-tick-a-thing. And then once in a while somebody'd say, and now, here they come, the Hoosier Hot Shots. How are you? Woo, 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 woo. They'd go off, and that was music in my world. That was called music. Yeah, I'll give you the brass bigligi with bronze oak leaf palm if you can tell me who one of the top hillbilly singers was at that time on a show called the Barn Dance, the National Barn Dance. Do you remember the National Barn Dance? You don't remember that? Oh, it was a big deal coming out of Chicago. Well, I'll tell you, he became later a gigantic movie star, an enormous top movie star, and furthermore, he is now the owner of a tremendous, or not so tremendous, a big investment in the major leagues. He owns a major league ball team. When I was a kid, he was singing on all those shows. Yeah, that's right. And there was another guy who came on those shows all the time and who was a hillbilly singer. I wonder how many people remember that. He would come on and he'd sing stuff like, "Old Rattler, Old Rattler," and you'd hear those guys playing the guitars back of him. And he later became a top TV comic. Think about that one. And he's still a top comic around. And he was a hillbilly singer when I knew this guy. Well, anyway, this is the kind of stuff that was coming out of my world. You know, this is the kind of music. And so I began to be interested a little bit in music because one of the kids in my school took up playing the tuba. I cannot. Once again, I must repeat with the fear of being boring that I believe that we are influenced all of our lives by the kids around us, far more than we are ever influenced by our parents. And this kid named Schwartz somehow took up the tuba. Don't ask me how he took it up, except that we were both in 8th grade and Schwartz took up a tuba playing in the 8th grade band in the school that I was in. Well, Schwartz was my best friend, and all of a sudden I was completely cut out of his world. Schwartz would sit up in his house and you'd hear pop, 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 pop. Have you ever heard a tuba player working over tuba scales, working over tuba exercises? And Schwartz had a magical thing going now. He played the tuba, and I remember we'd be playing baseball or something. We'd be all out knocking out flies, and his mother would come out on the porch and he'd say, "Time to practice, Paul!" And Paul would drop his second baseman's mitt, and he would take off like a bird, and about 5 minutes later you'd hear coming from his house, pop, 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 pop. He was a tuba player. Well, it sounds like a silly story, but about 3 or 4 months after Schwartz took up the tuba and he had been cut out of the herd and he was investigating beauty now. He was investigating the aesthetic world that had nothing to do with making a tag at third base. And about 3 or 4 months after that, Schwartz asked me, coming home from school one day, he says, "Listen, Mr. Melton says that there is a tuba open. There's a tuba open in the tuba section." He said, "How would you like to play the tuba?" Well, now there's a leading question. If I were to ask you right now, how would you like to become a tuba player? Now, I'll tell you what this did to me. I came home that night, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm sitting around there, and the radio is playing Bing Crosby records or something, and my mother is over there by the sink. My kid brother is sitting over there. This is making a tremendous decision, you know, because to learn to play the tuba, I recognized the magical quality of learning to play some kind of instrument. The only people who ever played instruments in my neighborhood, you'd see little skinny kids once in a while standing on street corners holding accordions, waiting for the bus to go in for Saturday morning for their accordion lesson, you know, that kind of thing. And it would be millions of little skinny girls taking what they called acrobatic dancing and tap dancing. There was another department called toe dancing. What happened to all the toe dancers? And so they would stand on a street corner, and I would be on my way down to the vacant lot of the ballpark, and I would see these guys, and that would be the extent of it. There was a girl named Rosella Pullen who played the saxophone. That I remember. At every PTA meeting I ever saw, she'd play something on the sax. Well, that was, it was magic, though. It was definitely magic. They knew something, and they'd been cut out of the herd. And here Schwartz asked me if I wanted to learn to play the tuba. So I'm sitting around at home thinking about how can I describe the feeling except that it was like I was embarking on something that would cut me out of a lot of things. Now, I had to give up baseball and all that. I knew that you had to learn to play the tuba. The tuba did not play itself, and you just sat behind it while the thing blew. And so I said, "Mom, you don't bring up, I'm going to bring home a tuba." And he said, "Ma, I'm going to play the tuba." And she says, "Well, you'll have to practice, you know." And I said, "Yes, I'm going to practice the tuba." She says, "Now, I don't want you to bring home any junk. I don't want you to bring home any junk that sits in the corner and gathers dust, and don't think we're going to buy you a tuba. Now, are you going to learn to play the tuba or not? Because all mothers want you to learn something, but they're always afraid of that routine, you know, of the guitar and the banjo and the accordion that lands in the closet, you know, for years. I mean, the $600 accordion is there underneath the overshoes and all that stuff. And so she says, now, you're really going to learn it? I said, yeah, Mom, I'm really going to learn it. And the next day, I am down at the school, and I now have in my hands, for the first time, an enormous instrument that I am learning to play. And Mr. Melton, the school band teacher, is sitting there, and he says, now, this is known as an E-flat tuba. You hold it this way, and it's an upright tuba. So he sticks my hand through the ring, and I got my hands on the keys. What a funny feeling, you know. At the first, you're behind it, and you're supposed to play this thing. Now, you're not just tooting it. And he says, now, blow into it, and when you do blow it, you make a sound that goes too, too. So I go too, nothing. He says, no, now keep trying that. I will go out. He says, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Just keep going too. So I go too, 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 too. And then finally I hear boop, boop. I'm getting the sound, you know, whatever. Two, two, two. And now I puff out my cheeks, and I'm starting to, and my head is going dizzy, you know, that the thing of blood. Two, two. And the door opens, and Mr. Melton says, fine, you're doing fine. He says, however, your attack is sloppy. He says, don't go boo. He says, go too, too. So I said, yeah, oh, okay. I'm sweating behind my tuba, you know, the big horn. I got my hands on the horn. He said, now don't press any of the keys. I don't want you to play any note. Just play the open note. Two. He goes, door locks. I'm sitting there and I go, two, two. And I could not resist. I pressed the first valve down. Two. Two. I pressed the second valve down. Two. The door opens. He says, don't press the valves. Now, I told you to play an open tone. You're working on your embouchure. My what? My embouchure. Speaking of tuba players, let's give the commercial people a couple of seconds here. Well, all I can really say for sure is that this horn caught me up like a maelstrom. Have you ever been caught in something that caused you to have a momentary hang-up? It's like, it must be the way dope is. It must be the way drugs are. I have never taken dope, never taken drugs. It must be the way it is. Day and night, I brought that thing home, and I could not leave it alone because it was beating me. It was beating me. And they had what they called an exercise book, and I learned the basic notes. Mr. Melton would say, now, you press the first one and the second one down, and you get a C natural and a, you hear now, boop, at the top, boop, the same note, an octave lower, boop, boop. Now, press the second valve down, you get a B natural, boop, boop. Oh, boy. You know, now, here's the way you would. So he's teaching me to read music, and then that night I would go home and I would go, boop, 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 boop. Bop, 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 bop. And then the door would open and my mother would say, haven't you practiced enough? I'd say, wait, Ma, I got it. Boop, 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 boop. And all the while in the front room there, my old man is trying to read the sport page. My kid brother is trying to stay out till 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving them out of their skull. Mrs. Bruner next door took to slamming her screen door. You know, boom, she'd go, boop, boop, boop. You have no idea how an E-flat tuba echoes from one house to the other when it is being blown by a kid who is working on his embouchure. Boop, 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 boop. Well, I got hung on that thing the way, I'm sure, the way Ahab was hung on a white whale. I am not kidding. I had this book, and I would work through my exercises that Mr. Melton would assign. And way at the back of the book, there would be these other exercises, you know, like 14 years later, you're supposed to learn how to play. And I would be working on these things. Notes that I had never read, notes that I had never seen before were there, and little things, little lines over them, little crooked things, and little slashes through them, little holes in them, and little dots next to them. I thought, gee whiz, wow. And I would read the book. Well, it got me hung. And from the day I learned to play that thing until years later, I was completely involved in tuba playing. Absolutely tuba. And I would go around all the time. I would be sitting in theaters, for example, and I would hear sound music, you know, background music, and my lips would purse, and I could feel that heavy push of that German silver mouthpiece on me, and I would go, and I would hear the tuba, and anything I listened to, I'd hear some guy way off in the background. You'd be surprised how selective the human ear is once it's got a hang-up. You know how certain people are politically? They'll talk about anything, international relations, war, it doesn't make any difference. They mention one thing. They mentioned the tax on the corn crop in 1938, and they're off like a nut for years. I'll tell you about the corn crop, and they're going on and on to hear one note. Well, Shepard went through maybe the first 10 years of his hearing only tubas. There'd be this gigantic piano concerto going on, and somebody would be up there playing. I'd hear Yasha Heifetz playing the violin. All I would hear is way in the back some guys going, oh, oh, boom, boom, boom. And you hear the violin, nothing. It's all erased for me. I'm hearing tuba players. Well, I was a dedicated tuba man. And so dedicated that it literally got to the point where it was a monastic, really, it was a vocation. And I would sit in the front seat of the car when I would be driven somewhere. I'd be sitting in the back seat. And I would literally, honestly, I can do that even now. I would have exercises that I worked out to improve my embouchure in sound. And I'm fingering. I'd sit there, and I am playing an entire tuba concerto all by myself, sitting there without a horn, nothing. And I'm just, speaking of tuba concerti, we now have the ID. So, gentlemen, break the station here. Okay, and now, while we're at it, let's give them time here to come in here with a couple of quick whoopies from the sales department or the promotion, whoever it is who's in charge of blowing the horn. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Well, now, the reason I brought all this up is that even to this very day, this is how deep these influences are on a man's life. You just never escape your childhood, and there's nothing whatsoever, I must repeat, it has nothing to do with nostalgia. It just has to do with what forms you and molds you eternally. Whenever I pick up a kazoo, whenever I find myself whistling, whenever I find myself humming, I invariably hum this. It just comes out automatically. Why? Well, I'm going to tell you why. I'll tell you why that rings through my life always like a faint bell tinkling down there in the soul. I can never erase it. It was the first time that I personally ever created beauty. Personally, I was responsible for it. I did it. And it's a story that has to be told because we all have this thing happen to us once or maybe twice in our lives. For years, I've been playing in the marching bands. And, of course, the marching bands were marching bands. You know, we'd play the Gold and Silver March. We'd play the NC4. And my idea of playing a tuba up to this point was going through the... Now, yeah, it's not actually beauty. Yeah, and it was playing the counterpoint to thousands of trumpets, thousands of trombones. The tuba player is a man who by nature must learn to efface his own basic ego. And so yes, it teaches humility at a very early stage. Way up there in the front, some guy is sitting at the piano. Now here, for example, now listen to this. Here's the typical thing. Bring it on there. The flutes are playing. Hear them? Oh, hear the oboes. Listen to those clarinets. What are the basses doing, I ask you? They are the woodwork in the vast architecture of life, just the woodwork. You don't even hear them there, do you, friends? Humming in the background. But they're there, hunched over their faces, waiting for that rest. Boom, boom, boom. But somewhere up in the front rank, there is a man seated behind an oboe. Yes, everywhere you go, someone is playing the melody. And it is the melody that people weep over. It is not that man in the background that just goes dong dong, dong dong dong, on his little timpani, dong. And once in a while he'll pick up a cymbal and go ding ding ding. No, people do not weep. They do not weep over the French horn going once in a while. They never do. It's the guy up in the front row with that violin, that weeping, soft, sensual violin. Yes. Now, how does that man feel who's playing that? Like a god. Like a god. I'll tell you, he sits there, and those notes are spread out before him, and he draws that bow over that string, and it comes out, pouring out. No, 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 no! Oh, no, 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 no. What was that? Comes pouring out. Good Lord. We suddenly switched into another channel, folks. But I'm telling you this. That minute, though, that man brings that string across that bow. Put that back up, Matt. No, no, not that. I said oh, man. That, up, that. There you go. Now, the point is that the minute that a guy sits down and he draws that bow across that string, he is making the statement. Whatever it was that the composer wanted to say, he is saying. He is Tchaikovsky. He is Mozart. He is Beethoven. He is whatever that great, all-encompassing note that runs through our soul, that rings way down at the bottom of our pancreas. He is that thing. He is. Now, way in the back row, there are men going, Somebody is going, Nobody hears him, but all the way up in the front row, you can hear the sound. There it comes, clear and simple and plain and beautiful. Listen to that. Well, for years I have been sitting in the back row. I have been lined up there. Now, I would suggest that for those of you who do not know what a tuba is, or a sousaphone is, or, no, don't put that up. I'll call for it with my finger, Nat. Don't just automatically stick them up there. Those of you who see those basses lined up back there, and those tubas lined up back there, it is hard for people to understand what they think. Now, I am here telling you about the back row, and that moment of creation that comes to each one of us. When that whistle blows, you got to be ready. Well, we've been working on things like all kinds of things. We play marching, we play march music, We play. You know, bands are kind of limited in what they play. There are only certain things that are transcribed for band use. And the tubas and the sousaphones and the trombones in the back usually are there, always, in the back. Well, one classical day occurred, classical in my life, because it was dramatic and an unforgettable moment. We came in one morning to band rehearsal, band and orchestra rehearsal. We used to rehearse in this great big auditorium. And Mr. Dirks, we called him Mr. He was a doctor, and he always used to say, "Don't call me doctor," because he says, he was one of those guys who walked around his life saying, "I don't believe in doctors," and he was a doctor. And so I came in that morning, and all of us were sitting down in, high school band rehearsal, one of those just routine days. And Mr. Dirks is up in front handing out music. He says, "We're going to work on something new today, and it's going to be for the big concert we're going to have this spring. We're going to work on this thing." And he said, let's all just take a look at the music first, and then we will try tentatively to play it through. He says, now examine your music, children, first. And so I spread open my music in front of me, and I'm sitting in the back row there, unsuspecting that a great moment was about to occur in my life. Not even realizing that forever and ever, even to this day, there would be something occur that would never be forgotten by me. I'm sitting there, and I look at this thing, and it looks like music at first, unless you're really a good sight reader, you can't visualize, especially when you're only looking at one part of an entire symphony, one part of an entire overture. I'm looking at this thing, and so Mr. Dirks says, "All right, now let's work through it very, very carefully now. Let's go from the beginning there." He says, "Take it from number 1. All of a sudden, I'm playing the notes, you see, and it goes. He taps. Wait a minute. All right, now look. All right, now. Already now I'm beginning to feel a little funny feeling in my stomach, you see, because this is very strange, because all the rest of the orchestra is behind us for the first time. He says, "Now, I want one tuba on the opening bars of this overture. I want one tuba." He says, "Shepherd, you play the opening bars of this piece of music now." See, I hate to tell you, I was first chair tuba. But now, first chair tuba isn't exactly what you think. He goes, that's what it is, usually. So I sat there, well, just me, the rest of the section? No? He says, "Yes." He said, "We want one tuba on this. Now, he said, watch me very carefully. I want you to play this with feeling." That is the first time, as a tuba player, I had ever been told to play anything with feeling. Up to this time, it was either, "Will you just hold it down a little? Not so loud." That's about it. Or, "Come on, bring it up a little bit." That's about the extent of it. So he raises his baton, and I am now crouched behind my tuba waiting. And he says, "Now, 1, 2, 3. Very good. Easy now, soft. And I've suddenly realized there's a sense that everybody in the band, the whole orchestra, actually it was an orchestra at that point, are listening to me and waiting to hear what I am going to do. And I can hear the violins playing quietly behind me. And then he raises both arms. Da, 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 da. The whole orchestra takes it up. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Let me tell you, from that day forward, I knew the power of evoking those tears in the eyes. And every time I'm in the bathtub, I'm taking a shower, what do you think I do? Da 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 da. Yes, it is my theme. It is my sound. Oh, listen to this. Who can avoid? Just bring it up. It doesn't matter. Just bring it up loud. That's very good. Who can avoid? Oh, boy, listen to that. Yeah, the power of sentimentality in the human soul has never been completely eclipsed. You just can't. No matter how hip you get, no matter how much involved you get listening to the hard, biting commentaries on today's world, it will always persist. Well, about another great traumatic occurrence. That's all right. I know what you worry about. Another great traumatic occurrence occurred. Speaking of traumatic, we'll let him go. Let the commercial department have its say here for a second. Well, I'd say about in my third year, playing in the band, playing in the orchestra, working. Oh boy, I'll tell you, you really learn about why certain composers are great composers and why certain composers are not when you play in an orchestra. You really do. I remember one harrowing, unbelievable afternoon when Mr. Dirks brought in some music, and he put on the record player. He used to have a record player that he used up on the stage, and he would say, "Now, children," he'd say, now, we had a crack orchestra. You know, it was the kind of orchestra that goes all over the country and wins prizes and gets awards. We were all dedicated. In fact, at least a half dozen of the kids that were in that orchestra are today members of top symphony organizations. I see them occasionally. It was really a dedicated group because old Dirks himself caused us to be. He was one of these dynamic, great teachers. I've run into about 3 or 4 great teachers in my whole life who can get you so involved in what it is and tell you and teach you the essence of what you're learning so that you never forget it. It just draws people right in. And so we were dedicated to this orchestra. And one afternoon, Dirks brought in some music, and he says, "Now, look," he says, "now we're really going to try an experiment." And he says, now this is going to be an experiment, and I want you to be very, very, just don't worry about it if you have trouble. Just sit and look at the music for a minute, and let's go. And he laid all the music out on the music sheets, out on the stands. We sat there and looked. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they wrote music like this. You know, we'd been going through all the standard stuff. We played Tchaikovsky, and we played Rachmaninoff, and no bands. Don't bring that up. Don't leap to the conclusions. I'll give the signals here. All you guys are anticipating me today. All wrong. Be careful. You're dealing with a pitcher that throws junk. He's not a fastball pitcher. You can't anticipate. And so I couldn't believe this thing. I just could not believe it. And everybody is sitting there back in the section. Now, I'll stop it. Now, no arguments in there. Just get back to the beat here. And I'm sitting there talking to Dunker next to me. And I said, "Dunker, what is this stuff?" He said, "I don't know." And sitting next to Dunker was Schwartz, who was still playing the bass. He's now down number 3. He said, "I don't know what it is." He said, "All right, let's try this." Well, poor old Dirk stood up there, and he gave us the downbeat, and we started to play this piece of music. It was a nightmare. An absolute, incredible, unbelievable nightmare. And it was just like all of a sudden this great orchestra that we thought we had was falling to pieces. Nobody could play anything, and it sounded like a cacophony of insane, wild sounds. And I'm saying, boom, boom, and no, this can't be, and nothing. And I'm playing the notes, and I know I'm playing the notes, and it's coming out awful. Well, it was the first time that this orchestra ever tried any Stravinsky. We were trying Stravinsky. You have no idea how difficult it is for an orchestra to play something that has no connection with the great past. It's even worse than the problem that's faced by the listener. The listener thinks he's having trouble. You ought to sit back there in that bass section and try to make sense out of something by, say, Eric Satie. I'll tell you, boy, it's an uphill climb. And so I'm sitting there, I'm trying to figure this out. And Mr. Dirks, after it was all over, the cacophony roared. Oh, it was insane. For about an hour and a half, we fought this thing through. And then he put it all aside, and he says, "Now," he says, "the reason I brought this in here, I want to show you, I just wanted to show you just how bad musicians you really are." He says, "Now listen to this." And he put on a record of something like the NBC Symphony or the Boston Philharmonic or somebody playing the same piece of music. And out it came. It was The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky, and it was fantastic. You know, we're sitting there listening. It sounded nothing like what we had been playing. And boy, it went on and on and on. He says, someday if you work, you may be able to approximate that. Oh, what a sense of defeat. What a sense of defeat. And he says, do you want to start at the beginning, fellas? Do you want to take it from number one now? Do you want to try it from the first? Oh, wow. And sure enough, we did. We took it from number one after having heard that record, and it was, oh boy, it curled our hair. From that day on now, I have a sense of great humility. Whenever I go to a symphony, whenever I listen to an orchestra playing on record, when I ever hear a great organization, you know, we always yell about Bernstein. We always talk about Koussevitzky. We always talk about the great conductors. Forget it. Believe me, there is no conductor unless he has a group of fantastic violinists sitting down there who really know what they're doing. Really. Managers of ball teams do not hit home runs. I am sorry. Managers do not make that beautiful hook slide into third base. They just don't. They do not. And Bernstein standing up there, he just does not do that. He just does not make that sound. That's all right. That's cute. Put it on. That doesn't mean now. Just get it on. That's all. He does not make that sound. He does not bring it out of the bar. Listen to that. Oh, man. And there's 1,000 little $80 a week guys sitting in there who have learned what they've learned all the way down the line and who vibrate to it. Have you ever known an old musician, an old symphony musician? Well, I have. In fact, one of my oldest friends is a man who is probably now in his late 80s. He's an old man. And at the age of 70, he was retired as a cellist from a great symphony orchestra. He played under all the conductors in the world. You know, one of these people that travel everywhere. Everywhere he went, he was playing under the... And the funny part of it was that whenever a conductor would come to town, they would come and visit old Hans. They would come and visit him. He played number 2 cello in the symphony orchestras for over 45 years. And all of these men knew one thing, that their reputation was based on his work. And 65 other guys like him. That when you reach out, you know, you see, have you noticed when the great conductor, when he reaches out and his baton lashes out and that violin section swells, ooh, it comes up. Well, can you imagine how silly Bernstein would look if they don't swell? If nothing happens? He goes like that and nothing. Oh, there are thousands of little Hanses back there going, ooh. Well, as a kid, you know, I learned these things. I learned this business of humility in a sense. Now, how to describe it, I don't know, except to say that the sense of creating this ba 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 ba. By the way, you notice the attack right there? Ba 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 ba. Speaking of attacks, let's bring the commercials in. Fine. How much time do we have here? 2 minutes? We have 2 minutes or what? Or 2 commercials? What? 2 minutes? Listen to me, not the notes again. 2 minutes. All right, 2 minutes. We've got 2 minutes and one more commercial to do. Let's give them time to do one more commercial. Hold on there, everybody. Stop the theme. They're going to do another commercial. All right, bring the theme on now. Surround us with great music. Surround us with thousands of musicians beating on drums, hitting tambourines, sweating in the back row of every symphony orchestra. Have you ever had the feeling that life itself is a gigantic symphony? Really. And some guys are playing the lead violin. Some guys are playing that lead piano, you know, in the great concertos of the piano world. What are you? Are you a timpani player in the world? In the whole scheme of life? Are you just a band boy that comes in and brings in the music and then leaves quickly? Are you the guy that sets up the chairs for the musicians? Or are you that pianist? Pum, 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 pum. Yes. Oh, yes, the world is full of 10 billion trap drummers, all of them waiting for a cue in a symphony that contains no trap drum music.